Okay, so I thought I'd do three examples, okay? When I did this slide and then I did the notes for it, I realised there's kind of an implication here that lawyers and policy people aren't normal. And then I thought I'd leave it there. Anyway, moving on. So, the reason why I like these examples is that they all tell you exactly what planning needs. So if you're a lawyer, you have to go to court with a plan. You have to have done a stack of research. You have to know what the case is. You have to be all on top of it, right? So then you walk into the court, it's all good, you're prepared, you've got a good plan. Okay? For the policy people, you have to have a good plan for all your policies, right? You have to research it, you have to, the OECD will be your friend. You need to know what it is that you're talking about. You need to know the ramifications of your policy. You need to get all the other departments on board. All that planning goes into play for your policy. And of course, for normal people, if you're planning a party, well, you need to know how many people are coming so you can work out the food, right? You need to work out whether you've got enough chairs. Are you going to have it at your house? Are you going to have it at a different venue? All these sorts of questions, right? And you have to plan all these things or they just don't work out, right? And the way you do the planning is you've got, this purpose. Well, what's the purpose of this court case, the purpose of this policy, the purpose of this party? And then that starts to frame what you're doing. Same with research. What's the purpose of your research? What's your question, right? Scope. Okay, well, in a court case, this is how much law applies. In policy, well, we're only allowed to pull these particular policy levers. We're not allowed to pull anything else. For a party, well, do we want to invite all the family or can we really exclude those cousins that we hate? All right? So, you've got to scope it. It's the same in research. What's the scope of your research? And that's where the variables come in. The variables tell us how big your research is. Because it tells us I'm doing 15 to 18-year-olds and their opinion on blue chairs in lecture theatres. Because that tells us that you've gone from what are chairs to 15 to 18-year-olds blue chairs in a lecture theatre. So you've scoped it for us. All right, what's the nature of it? Well, what's the essence of the research what's the essence of the court case that you're doing? Is it a criminal court case? Is it a civil court case? All those kind of important questions. The nature of the policy, is it a social policy? Is it an economic policy? What's the actual entity of it? The nature of the party, well, is it an afternoon tea or is it a piss-up? All those important questions. For research, it's the same thing. What's the nature of it? Is it an empirical, a methodological, or a theoretical problem? What's its nature? What's its essence? Right? And feasibility, the court case, do we have a chance of winning this? Policy, does this really have a chance of getting up? Party, are we really going to pull this off? Research, is this really going to happen? Is it feasible? Can I do this? Is it really practical to want to interview 500 people in 3 weeks? Okay, so people try. So you need to think about, can we actually physically do this? Is this actually physically possible? The thing I really like about this is that in a court case, you can go in prepared, and this happens all the time. You have spent months of work on a court case. You have gone and looked at all the other cases, you have all your precedences lined up, blah, 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 and you walk in and they go, yeah, well, about that, let's settle. And you go, but I'm good. Okay, we'll settle. Okay, I had a mate of mine who was a prosecutor and she had spent a lot of time prepping a case because it actually had no legs. And they were relying on a particular piece of evidence that she didn't think had legs, and so she'd done a lot of precedent cases and things like that. And she walked into the court and went, yeah, we're going to do this. And the cop said, yeah, he's pleaded, don't worry about it. And she went, thanks, and walked out. Okay? So she didn't have a case, but the guy pleaded anyway. So all that planning for nothing. Policy. I have literally spent 6 months on a piece of policy. It was great, it was fantastic, it was a whole team, it was brilliant, I loved it, it was gorgeous. And then we had a minister change. And the new minister did not care. So that was 6 months of the taxpayer dollar up in smoke. And there's actually a joke in the public service. You put all of these policies in your bottom drawer and you just bring them out when you have a change of minister and see whether you can get them back up again. It works. And of course the party, right? You've organised the party, it's all good, but then Mary turns up and says, oh, I brought Fred, is that okay? Yeah, you can bring Fred, that's fine. And then John turns up and it's like, oh yeah, my 2 mates are in town, you don't mind? No, that's fine. And then Elizabeth turns up and goes, oh look, the girls are in town as well. And so the next thing you know is your party of 10 people has turned into 70 people. All right, so then that means Uber Eats, right? Okay, that's a true story. I had a housewarming of 10 people and 70 rocked up. And that was before Uber Eats. So, these things happen, right? And the same thing happens in research. You will have the best plan in the world and it will just disintegrate before your eyes. Okay? In a thesis, you have 3 points. You have submission, so application, confirmation, and then you submit your thesis at the end, right? So I want to apply, I get confirmed. And confirmation happens about 12 months in. And basically, that's where you stand up and you say, am I good enough to keep going? And people judge you and say yes or no. My confirmation submission for my thesis looks nothing at all like my thesis. It has a whole different purpose. It has a whole different scope, a whole different nature, and different feasibility. It's completely different. But my research is still going to work. But it's just different from what it was. But I had a good plan. So what does a plan actually look like? I could be being postmodern here, right? I'm not. A plan is whatever you want it to be. In research, if you are looking for a grant, you will have a template that you have to fill in. Okay? If you're doing a thesis and you're going for confirmation, there's a certain template you've got to fill in for your plan. If you're going for a particular funding body, philanthropy and all those like the Grattan Institute or something like that, they've got templates that you've got to fill in. But otherwise, how it looks is irrelevant. What's in it is what matters. And what's in it is those 10 steps. You've got to articulate your problem, you've got to have your scope, you've got to have how you're going to do it, how you've thought about it, how you're going to go about getting that data, what you're going to do to analyse it, all that sort of stuff. It's the content that matters. How it looks does not matter. My thesis planning actually happens in a blog. I actually blog my whole thesis, and that's where all my planning happens. So you can actually see the shift across my planning, and then I do some research, it goes wrong, I change my plan, and then I go again. All right? So that's how it works. All right? So there is actually no real plan, and there is actually no real process or no real template in how you actually make it look. It's all about what's in it and what works for you. Some people do journals, hold it in a journal. Some people just do it in Word. People do it in all sorts of different ways. But the important thing is you've got it.